There's different ways to look at just the whole idea of spirituality and finding a way to understand the bigger questions in life. One angle, one tool, one kind of a path that I seem to keep returning to is based around this. It's the idea that the kingdom of heaven is within. It's what Jesus taught. And that perspective informs how I see, understand, and experience the outer world. If bliss is within, then my relationship to the outer world takes on a different perspective. It doesn't necessarily diminish it. It puts it in a different perspective. And by that I mean, at some point, what's within informs my soul, informs me personally, deeply. And then it reveals itself in the physical world. So it's those concepts of planting a garden within, tending to it spiritually, that spiritual garden, tending to it, spiritual practice, building it up, producing fruit, so that then, and from within, so that then in the physical world, as I show up, now that perspective takes on a different meaning. It's the idea of bringing forth bliss, bringing forth fruit into the world around me. Because I think what we all wrestle with is the tension in search of transcendence, in that in the spiritual world is transcendence. But the tension we experience is because we survive in the physical realm. And there's a balance between the two that's a very difficult one that I suggest is the work of the lifetime for every one of us. But it's the idea that, as Jesus shared, in the world you shall have tribulation. But, he says, so he acknowledges, let me just back up, he acknowledges the tension that is all around us in the physical world that we experience. Even when we set ourselves up nicely, there's still an underlying tension, or can be, unless you really do a great job of covering it up. But if you give it enough, at least for me, if you allow, you'll recognize there's a tension in the physical world to the degree that that I grow spiritually. They become more and more incompatible. And it's not a judgment on anything. It's not a judgment of the exterior world or the physical world or anything else. It's just the reality of it. And so the idea that you're born of water, you have a natural birth, a physical birth, and you're born of spirit. And those two essences, those two selves have to, one, coexist. I mean, let's just take a step back. One has to recognize that they both exist. And then once you do, then you have to find a means for them to coexist. In other words, the physical self, we're good at that. That's where we live. It's where we survive, but it's where we encounter our walls. It's where we run up against kind of the roadblocks. And that balance is our spiritual world has to exist in equal or greater measure, because from within, from the spiritual world is where Jesus taught us bliss exists. Within us. We won't find it in the external world. Kauai, the island of Kauai. Some perfect days, literally perfect days. But I know I couldn't move there and it would just be that way perpetually. Something would happen, whether it's weather or myself with something. It's not perpetual. So to the point, even the most obvious, like amazing way of being in the physical world, still there's no heaven on earth. Jesus said you'll have tribulation. But he goes on to teach, but be of good cheer. Like, be happy, be joyous, rejoice, like, be good with it all. And he says, because I have overcome the world. He's saying, like, the way I show up, what I'm teaching you, what I understand of what is truth is what sets me free. So when he says, in the world you have tribulation, but be of good cheer, for I've overcome it. I've overcome it. And this is how I've overcome it. I'm teaching you the kingdom of heaven is within. Don't try to anchor yourself to the physical world. And that's a thread that's within a lot of spiritual teachings. Be unattached. Doesn't mean that you check out. I mean, that's a whole nother conversation. Jesus, if I were to try to wrap it up and talk about as we work on the physical world and developing the kingdom of heaven within and figuring that out for ourselves, that's it. There's a physical world and a spiritual world. And that spiritual world is where the kingdom of heaven exists. And our spiritual practice is what brings us to that greater and greater familiarity, growth, expansion of our spiritual self. And it's our job to know this truth, that there is a spiritual self and a physical self, and that the kingdom of heaven is not in the outer world. We're not going to find it in things, in places, in people, in money, in safety, in security. There may be things in the physical world that make our journey easier, but it doesn't mean we find heaven. So in some ways, that's the good news, is that any one of us, regardless of bank account, possesses the ability to have the kingdom of heaven within them. That's a difficult one. But I mean, just to wrap up on this, that's the stuff to me that needs our attention. If anyone wants to consider the message of Jesus, the role of Jesus, the relationship of the individual to Jesus, how about start there? We've been given a priority for how to understand Jesus and God and ourselves. And it's really not the same priority that Jesus taught. Kingdom of heaven is within us. So what do we got to do to find it?